If you have any trouble hearing, please, don't raise your hand or say something. So first, let me hand it over to Ethan. Sorry, Ethan Kurzweil from Bessemer.
No worries. Thank you, Ben. Ethan Kurzweil. I'm a partner with Bessemer Venture Partners. We are a global, I'll emphasize that for this crowd and this topic, venture firm. We have three offices in the US, Israel, India, Brazil, and Russia. We've been around for about 100 years. Originally started as part of the Bessemer Securities Company, which was the partner of Andrew Carnegie and started Carnegie Steel. And so we date our work back to the industrial era of this country and have kept going along with every technological change since. So I've been with Bessemer for about 5 years. I focus my investing in the consumer world as well as the developer platforms and developer tools world as well. We invest in everything from very early stage Series A, that's sort of our genesis, our bread and butter, to later stage growth equity financings as well. So pleased to be with you. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Sean Lynden, I'm a partner with Gold Hill Capital. We're a venture debt fund that makes loans to startups and mostly growth stage IT companies. I've been with the company for 9 years since we spun out of Silicon Valley Bank. And we focus mostly on the IT space, so we don't do much in the life sciences space. And my specialization is more in the hardware type of the market.
Hi everyone, thanks for having us here tonight. My name's Ryan Sweeney, I'm a general partner at Accel. I've been with the firm about 5 years. Spent a lot of my time in our later stage investing practice, so it's companies that tend to be 10 million or so in revenue, product out to market, and very global in nature. I sit on the board of Atlassian Software, which comes out of Sydney. Oz4X is another Sydney-based company. Work with a Canadian business called Lightspeed. And at Accel, we're big believers that the world's becoming a smaller place, and part of the reason why we've pursued those Australian-based businesses is because they do think global from day one, and we kind of like that aspect about it. From our firm's perspective, we manage about $3.5 billion or so out of the US today. We also have offices in the UK, China, and India right now. So definitely similar to Bessemer, trying to practice what we preach in terms of being global and going international.
Hi, I'm Stacy Bishop with Scale Venture Partners. I'm a partner there, been there about almost 14 years. So I was in the venture industry at the last bubble, for some of you who weren't probably even in the business at all. Anyway, we recently raised a $300 million fund. We broadly invest in cloud infrastructure and SaaS applications. Some of our investments include Box, DocuSign, ExactTarget, HubSpot, just to name a few. I specifically focus on SaaS applications, and we invest early in revenue, so 100K MRR, all the way up to late stage investments. And we actually are only in the US and primarily invest only in the US, but the companies we invest in often expand internationally at a certain point. So that's, the interest in this panel.
Great, thank you. Let me just do a quick check. Everyone can hear in the back. It's audio's okay? Okay, fantastic. Here, what I need to do, guys, is just have you share that one. Okay, we'll give this a try. Okay, so let me go ahead and get this started here, and Sean, you've been tagged with the first question. So let's say that company A has a strong business model, a large growing market, and a scalable product offering. Now what? When is the right time to expand overseas? And what are you looking for from a company when deciding to invest in, or if you're already an investor, approve that international expansion, and if there's any red flags you can think of?
I think from our perspective, it's less of a when, because every situation is different. Less of a when in terms of every situation is different, but a why are you trying to expand internationally? I mean, if you've got a good growing market domestically, obviously that's a lot easier than trying to take on all the headache of going overseas. And so you're trying to look at it from a holistic perspective of how does this fit into your entire go-to-market strategy? Are there particular reasons why you want to go over internationally? Are there regulatory or product differentiations that you think are make it more easier or make it a better market for you to go after? For example, we had a company in the enterprise software space that sold to the utilities, and they went to Australia very early on because the way the regulatory environment in Australia is set up, it's much easier to sell into utilities there than it is here in the US. So that made perfect sense, but if it doesn't fit in terms of your overall plan, sometimes you're just overreaching and creating headaches where you really don't need to.
That makes sense. Anything to add?
Sure, I'll pile on. I mean,
It's the first thing for me is just how are you going to prove to me you're not going to screw up what you're doing well right now before you start thinking international? You know, what do you do good in your domestic market? Convince me that that's sustainable, and then let's start talking internationally as well. So I do think proving out the scalable business model and showing all the growth characteristics that's been articulated is very, very important. But you also want to keep your eye on the ball. And we were kidding around before we jumped into this that focus would probably be a big topic of conversation across this panel, and it is. It's hard. I mean, I do think making sure that you're nailing what you're doing first and foremost is also critical as you embark upon these different types of decisions.
I think one key factor that informs this decision is how applicable is your strategy here to overseas. And it's going to be different in a lot of cases. I think with general cloud computing and SaaS type companies, it may be the case that what you're doing here will work in the same way in the international market in the same way. And I'm looking at Pedro from SendGrid over there. They've been international since I think very early on because folks code the same way, whether they're in Brazil or whether they're in Russia or they're in the US. The developer tools tend to be the same things. For an enterprise software company that's dealing with accounting regulations or dealing with payment infrastructure or something like that, that one may be where the focus argument trumps we can just go do everything quickly. So there may be cases where it makes sense to go soon. I think probably Ryan's admonition to think about whether that's going to screw up what you're doing already well is going to be most important usually though.
That's a good point. Anything else? Okay. Ryan, you've already got the microphone, so we'll go to you next.
Let's do it.
So as a practical matter, what can the company do to facilitate your decision? So is it bringing a superstar business development expert with an international track record? Is it aligning itself with local experts? Is it providing a thought-through growth model that focuses on, say, one or two markets or geographies and then expands from there?
The first thing for me is kind of proving that the demand is there. And the nice thing is with the internet, we live in a world where pretty much everything is quantifiable. So if you launch a business anywhere in the world, you're going to be able to track your traffic. You're going to be able to see if you're a software company, who's downloading your software and where it's coming from. If you're a consumer product business, you're going to be able to see where people are trying to have you ship products. So showing up day one with just the stats and saying, hey, this is what we're seeing. This is why we think this opportunity is there. We are seeing this demand, I think is just critical. And if you don't have that piece of the puzzle, it's going to be a really short conversation. Second is just doing a lot of homework up front. What makes this market unique? What are the challenges? What do you know about even just setting up an office in these different regions? It takes a lot of complexity. And then convincing us that you've thought this through and you have done a little bit of the work, I do think is critical. And then last, as it is with everything, for me, it's all about the people. So who on your team is going to raise their hand and go and lead this? If you don't have someone that's going to be able to take what you're doing well domestically and bring that overseas, again, it's going to be a really short conversation. And then also being able to articulate who you think the right kind of people are overseas that can lead this, because we'll probably get into this a little bit later. I do think kind of a blend of cultures is very, very important, making sure that the good practices, the culture you established in one geography carries over to the next is critical. So that means someone has to raise their hand and probably go, but also being smart enough to realize that, cultures and local languages and everything else are going to be really, really hard to replicate. So we're going to need to hire great people on the ground if we're going to pull this off. So there's a lot of complexity, and I do think putting the homework in and thinking it through up front tends to grease the skids a little bit and make it an easier transition to make.
That makes sense. Let me go off script here real quick. You talked about hiring the right people, right? What's your sense in terms of sending someone here from corporate? I know every situation is different, right? But versus sending someone who knows the organization inside and out and may not necessarily know the local environment as well, versus having someone who doesn't know the company as well but understands the local environment.
Yeah, I think it's really important, at least my opinion, to do that, because if you're expanding overseas, theoretically you should be doing something right and you should have a pretty good business to begin with. So someone who's seen that, understands how you've grown, what you've done well, what your culture is all about, what your mission is, and your values and everything else. What you don't want is there to be to have a fractured organization all of a sudden, and it's us here and them over there. We never talk to them. We don't know anyone in that office. So I really do think a strong employee, a good leader is important to have there. But then you don't want it to become U.S. Part 2, and that's where I think the hard part comes in about
who are the right people to hire? What are the right backgrounds? Who are some of the companies? It could be in Europe or Germany. I mean, you name it, pick your favorite geography. What companies do we admire? Who do we think will be the right type of people to go and recruit from? And thinking that through and augmenting the team, I think is really, really important.
Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll reiterate that point on the hiring the key person or sending someone over there. In one case with Exact Target, when we invested in them, they were not international at all. They were $70 million in revenue, all US based, and it was actually their customers that were pulling them overseas. Like one customer said, I can't sign unless you're in Europe. And so they went in Europe and basically they actually acquired a little company, which I think was a good practice. And they put one of the key executives that the CEO really trusted so that he could essentially build the playbook and understand how to go international. And they just focused on that one territory, open an office in Lynden, focused on Europe initially, and then, they managed to take it from there. But they really wanted to understand it, do it right, do it with an executive that the CEO trusted and knew that they would get it, they wouldn't mess it up. So I think that's key. And then hire the local people there. And then they would essentially build a team over time who kind of would do these international office openings, who were, do a 6-month gig and help bring on the team and help bring that culture to those offices.
That's great. Okay. Stacy, back to you. Are there recent examples where a portfolio company expanded the right way, or of course the wrong way, that we can, and of course you can leave out the the names if need be, that we can point to as a roadmap generally for international expansion?
Well, I just highlighted some of them, and that was, one of the things that I think was important was to look at acquisitions if possible, even if it's small, like say you're a marketing services product, maybe there's a reseller or an integrator or something like that to help, someone mentioned earlier, getting office space and just understanding kind of who to hire. So it's kind of nice if you can find something. That's worked with a couple of our companies where they've gone in and acquired little companies that might be 5 or 10 employees. And these are bigger companies, north of, somewhere 30 to 50 million in revenue. And that's actually one thing to highlight. That's often when the companies seem to go international, is they're of that size and scale by the time they decide to go, because they've really nailed it in the US first, if they were a US based company. And so that's, I think, one key point, is looking at the acquisition opportunity and then sending that key executive over there to start so that you really kind of bring that culture over to the company. But those were some of the things that worked. Some of the things that don't work is probably expanding too quickly, opening too many international offices at once can be overwhelming for the company and just kind of not really being focused. So I liked when they kind of did one at a time, maybe one every 6 months or one every year type thing, and really try to figure out what worked in that, in that country or in that continent before they went to the next one. So I think that's really critical.
I think one thing Stacy said that bears repeating is, it falls in the category of don'ts on your question, is do you know what's working about your business? Just full stop. It's actually the same answer to the question, when's the right time to raise more money or expand into some other product area or take your company to the next level in general. But do you have a really good understanding about what's working for your company at all in the US or wherever your home base of operations is? And then what is it about that you can take internationally? Will that give you the same kind of advantage you have here in that region? And so I think where I've seen it fail is when companies they think they know what's working, but they don't really have a sense of what are the drivers of the business, what are the ways we measure our progress, our milestones along the way, to know what's working for us so that we can take those things and be able to understand them in a different context where some of the variables are going to be different.
And one other thing I'd add, and it's not particular portfolio company do's and don'ts, but the ones in our portfolio and the ones I worked with that have done it best were the ones who are committed to it. And they send someone over there not as an experiment, but with a budget, with projections, saying we expect X amount of revenue out of you this year. We're committed to it. We want you to go hire 50 people, do it fast. We need salespeople. And what you find is you get these young, hungry people from the companies raising their hand that want to go do that, and they rise to the occasion. And I don't think, if you're not serious about it, if you're saying, geez, let's go dip our toe into Europe, or let's go figure out Asia, and we'll see how it goes, and we'll evaluate in 6 months, it just never, ever works. I think you have to put the responsibility on the individual you're sending over there and empowering them to go and deliver upon that. Qualtrics is one of our more recent portfolio companies that's expanding overseas right now, and they're kind of an enterprise research business. they asked around the company, who wants to go overseas? And they got a lot of young 20-somethings that were 2-3 years on the job saying, we want to go do this. And they said, absolutely, let's go build around you guys. They opened an office in Ireland, and the executive teams are over there every month. The CEO will just pop in as if he's in the neighborhood. And it's kind of working because they feel this responsibility to deliver on that. And I think the ones that were just, yeah, it seems good, this may be a way we can keep growing, just never tend to work.